Got a package shipped in today from a client to repair. This one here is a small box. I'm assuming it's a camcorder. But we'll have to wait and find out what arrived as a safe. It's a mystery package, kind of like this mystery opening screen. Let's see what I got sent and see if we can get it going. Check this one out. I received the box at the post office. A mystery box of something coming in for repair, or at least evaluation. We'll see. It's a small box, so I imagine it's probably a camera of some type. And a letter. That's a camcorder. This one came in from, where did it come from? Portland, Oregon. Let's see what type of camcorder we've got to look at today. Wrapped up in bubble wrap, that's always a good sign. It's a Hi8 CCD TRV138. And the compartment is partially open. This is actually a relatively common problem on a lot of these camcorders where the compartment won't close. You really gotta love these claims. 990 times digital zoom. Okay, so what are you gonna be looking at? 1 pixel in the middle of the screen at 990 times zoom? Yeah, okay. So that part works. It opened the cassette compartment. Let's see if it will close. Of course, this time it will, because this is an intermittent problem on these. And it's a known issue with all these camcorders. This one was from the camcorder era that I didn't really care for. I didn't like these ones at all, only because of the design. You see, the problem with this type of camcorder, and Sony copied JVC. JVC started this crap, maybe Hitachi too. But the problem with the design like this is, say you've got your camera mounted on a tripod and you need to load a tape or change a tape. You've got to take it off the tripod, and then you've got to unscrew, if you've got a quick release mount on, you've got to take your quick release off in order to open up the cassette compartment, because as you can see, if you don't, well, even if you could with the quick release bracket mounted on it, if you could release this and open it, you can see what's going to happen. This is opening now, by the way, as you guys can see. Well, there we go. You can see what's going to happen. That's going to result in a bent mechanism. It was a really stupid design. This is something that JVC started with some of their mini DV camcorders, and Sony followed suit. And it's got to be one of the dumbest. I think Canon used this type of design too. It's got to be one of the stupidest designs that I've ever seen in a camcorder. So the problem with this one is that there's a known issue with some of these camcorders, that when you close it down, it won't retract, and then it will. And it's usually a switch. When you close down the mechanism, when the latch closes, there's a little catch that closes, and when the catch closes, it presses on a switch, which signals the microprocessor that the camera or the mechanism is ready to load. And sometimes that switch doesn't latch properly, and that appears to be, that's what the complaint is on this one. See, the camera works, but there's times where it doesn't latch. Hence the reason why it came to me with the mechanism sticking out like that. So let's take this one apart and see if we can find that switch and clean it up. It's usually either the switch that's bad or the ribbon, one of the ribbon cables where it plugs into the board, because the switch is on the on one of these retractable mechanisms. First thing is we'll remove the side cover. I think it's just a couple screws on this one that hold it in place. gotta take the hand grip off to do this. Okay, now we can see the mechanism a little bit better. The switch is right there. That little switch. What happens is when the mechanism is closed, and you can't see it from here, but there's a little catch. You can see it right down here. This little foot right here. Where is it? There. That's the catch. And when it closes, that pushes the switch back. And if the switch doesn't activate, the mechanism doesn't go in, right? So when you close it down, that goes like that, and that in effect pulls this lever forward, and the machine will start to close. Like that. So, but if it doesn't catch, it won't close. And this is the common problem on this, is that little switch there, the contacts go bad in that little push switch, a little pin switch. Well, it's a little lever switch, I guess. Anyway, if it doesn't signal that the compartment is closed, it won't close. Another problem that happens is this is on these flexible cables here. So if the connection where the flexible cable plugs into the main board develops a bad connection, it'll also cause the same problem. So on these ones here, the best solution is to take the transport apart, reseat the connectors, and try to get a bit of cleaner into that switch. That's generally what you got to do on these ones. I actually went to the post office today to mail something, a camera that I sold a fellow back in Quebec. One of the cameras I fixed before, because I sell the cameras that I service. And this was waiting for me because the person that sent it to me, I don't know how long it's been sitting there, but they missed one of the, on my P.O. box, they missed one of the lines on my P.O. box. And oh, they didn't miss the line, they typed it in wrong. Yeah, they typed it in wrong. So what happened was the post office had it sitting there for me. Then when I went to mail something else, they said, "Hey, we got a package for you." But they actually had all the information correct. It's just they put my box number ahead of the PO box. The way our system is like everything goes to PO box 99900, and then there's 6 digits that follow that, and they had the first 3 digits and then PO box 99900, and then the last 3 digits. And someone just, of course, when they keyed in the computer, it didn't come up. That's what the problem was when they keyed it in. Anyway, it's here, so getting used to this mechanism. I've never taken one of these ones apart. This was produced after I left the repair business, so I never got a chance to do any work on these ones. So I'm just kind of studying what needs to come out. I guess that screw needs to come out there. And I want to get to the edge connectors that are along here where they plug into the mechanism. The nice thing about Sony is that they marked everything with arrows. All the screws that need to come out are marked with arrows. one can never take too much time to dismantle a camcorder. Still a few more screws. Because these are a precision unit and they need to go back together, so you don't want to miss any steps or force anything that could bend apart and cause it not to go back together. When you think about it, a camcorder is probably the most complex device that the average person would have owned at that time. Looks like this one, there's an arrow here pointing up, so I'm taking that screw. There we go. That'll remove the deck from the cabinet. And oh, one more. That's why the front's not coming off. There we go. Now the front will come off. I tell you, that little heater that the neighbor gave me that they had in their shed, they bought a new one, right? So they said, here, you can have my old heater, it's broken. If you fix it, you can have it. So I'm using it in the shop here. It saved me having to put on that big 4.8 kilowatt electric heater that heats the whole shop up. Today is not a particularly, it's not a cold day, but it's damp. It's like it's like, I think it's 8 or 9 degrees today, Celsius, right? But it's raining. So it's damp, so it feels cool in here. So I got the little heater sitting below me, below my desk here, and it's actually kind of nice. It's quiet, and it's keeping me nice and toasty warm here as I work on this thing. And it's not making a bunch of noise like the other one that makes enough noise to wake the dead. Okay, now there should be some ribbon cables that I can unplug here. There we go. Okay, that's got that part off. The viewfinder is plugged in here, and the battery pack, so we'll just undo the viewfinder. I always get nervous with these things because they break so easy. And then the battery connector, power connector. And the camera is now stripped down. Now the edge connectors I'm looking for are these ones that are on the top here that connect the chassis. I just want to reseat them because this is usually the ones, the one that goes to the main chassis, I believe, is this one right here. So I just want to take these out and just kind of reseat them because that is a known problem on all of these camcorders, is that these edge connectors tend to cause problems, as well as these pin switches. This is the type of switch here. This is the switch for the that was the switch there for the night shot, right? So what happens when you turn on the night shot is there's a filter here that gets moved away from the CCD, which is on the back here. CCD is back here. So there's a optical filter that actually moves out of the way. So the filter's in front of the CCD there. When I flip the switch, you can see its little lever moves. That little lever there is actually physically removing the filter, the infrared cut filter, but it's also activating the switch. Now, in the early generations of camcorders, all the switch did was, when the switch closed, it basically opened the lens iris up wide to gather the most amount of light, and it also turned on that green cast to make it look like you were looking through night vision goggles. That's all the switch did. And when you removed the infrared cut filter, the infrared light could pass through the lens, and then if you used an appropriate infrared pass filter, such as one of those Kia optics filters, you could actually see just infrared spectrum. That would cut out all the visible spectrum, so that only the infrared spectrum was making it to the CCD. The problem that happened was the infrared the infrared pass filter could see through sheer clothing, no problem, especially black. So people would call them X-ray filters, so they could see under someone's clothes, which was what they marketed these things at to all the perverts. The guy that gave me his, well, he didn't give it to me. The guy passed away, and I was given a bunch of his stuff after he passed away, and one of the things that was in his collection was a camcorder and an infrared pass filter and some tapes that he had shot down at the beach. Can't show you those, trust me. Anyway, the old camcorders, all they did was remove the filter and open up the iris, which of course would cause the camera to go into an overexposed mode if you use it outside with an infrared pass filter. So what people would do is they would just take the switch and they would remove it, cut the wires or whatever, take the switch out and bend it over at an angle so that when you flip the switch, it did not switch that. And the camcorder I was actually given with this filter, he'd done that with, so you could flip it into night shot in the day, and it would see perfect infrared in full sunlight. And it is kind of a neat filter to play with. If you're looking at, it'll see right through the clouds, right? So it'll see right through the snow. So like I can put that camera on, and in the daytime turn it on, and it sees in black and white, obviously, with an infrared pass filter. That's all you see is infrared light, which appears as a black and white image. But it's the neatest filter because it'll see right through the clouds. If there's any clouds, it'll see completely through the clouds. And it'll see right through the snow. Like I can point it at the mountaintops when there's snow on them, and it'll see the bloody rocks below the snow. It is the coolest filter. They're really cool what they can do. And I've played around with them, examining documents and stuff, and looking at the infrared markings on papers and so forth. But what Sony did in the later cameras, because they found out that what people were using them for were spying, using them for voyeur cameras, is they changed the way that the filter works. That the filter itself actually has a corrective refraction to it, like a lens element. And what they did to stop the voyeurs from using these filters was, when you put the camera in infrared mode, like if I put this one, for example, if I put this one into infrared mode, you'll see what happens. Let me flip the switch here. Watch the process that happens on this. You see? You actually see the filter actually remove. This one here uses a little motor to move the filter. See the filter moving back and forth there? What it also does is it also changes the focus. You see the camera has to refocus. Right? You see that? It refocuses. When the filter drops in, it'll go out of focus momentarily, and then it has to refocus. Same with when it goes into night shot, and then it has to refocus. So what Sony did to stop the voyeurs from using these infrared pass filters is that, because normally you would only use night shot at night to see in the nighttime, so they open the iris up wide on the lens, so there's no, and they turn the gain up, because there's no need for the exposure control to work when you're working in a dark environment. So as soon as the switch gets activated, the iris opens wide on the lens. It also, because the infrared cut filter now has a refraction to the lens, it also now reprograms the autofocus to compensate for one less corrective lens in the optical chain. The reason they did that was so that when the smart guys said, well, if we disable this switch, not only will we disable the picture turning all green, but we'll disable the auto exposure going to full on wide open lens. That way we can use it outside without it blowing out. But because they programmed in an autofocus correction, if you take away the infrared cut filter without activating the switch, and what some of the guys would do is they'd put the switch halfway in between, They would find a happy medium where the filter was removed but the switch wasn't activated, like that. But anyway, that's what they did. The newer cameras, everything but the first generation camera, I think the first or second generation camera, well, the first generation didn't do anything. First generation, you could flip it into night shot and it would work perfectly. They didn't disable the auto exposure. And then the second generation, they disabled the auto exposure when it was in night shot mode. But the smart guys figured out that all you had to do was remove the switch, and then the auto exposure would work again. So the third generation, not only did they mess around with the auto exposure, but they also added that extra corrective lens to the infrared cut filter, so that doing that, if you disconnected that switch, sure, you'd get a properly exposed image, but it was out of focus, and there was no way that you could manually focus it. Even if you put the camera in manual focus, it was still beyond the range of what the camera could do, unless that switch was activated, and then that changed the calibration. They got sneaky. Anyway, that's a little history on the night shot. And I did a video on the night shot a while back. There is one on my channel. I played some of that tape that my perverted dead friend had shot. I didn't show anything that I thought was controversial. In other words, there's no nudity or anything on it. But I did show a few shots that were taken down at the beach of people's backs. I didn't show any faces or anything else. Just showed the backs where you could see, you could see through the t-shirt to see the bikini that was under the t-shirt, is what I showed. And well, that was beyond, that was too much for YouTube, because they demonetized and gave me an 18+ rating. So I had to re-edit that video and take out all those shots. Anyway, let's open this one here up. I'm just gonna reseat these connectors one at a time, and it might not even hurt to clean them a bit with some deoxit while I've got it apart. Just wipe the contacts down with deoxit. Probably wouldn't hurt, especially this one, even though they don't look bad, but it might not be a bad idea. Anyway, I started out the last video, I guess it was, I did the one on the VCR, talking about my entry into the service business, and I figured I'd continue that because you guys might find it interesting. So when I was, say, young, I used to go to my neighbor that lived across the street from where I live now, if that makes sense. Bought the house that was across the street from him, but he was long gone at that point. But he taught me the basics, right? He taught me the basics of vacuum tube stuff. He was a tube jockey. And then when I was in high school, I studied electronics. I built several projects. The favorite project that I built was a black and white Vidicon tube camera. I should say I wish I still had it, but I had it hanging up outside, doing what people did with security cameras, used them to watch their front door, their front yard, etc. And one day I turned on my monitor. I think I had the monitor in my bedroom. My bedroom was around the back of my parents' house. So I think I used to even leave the monitor turned on all the time. One morning I woke up and I looked on the screen, and the screen was blank. And I went running out to the front to see why the camera wasn't working, and the camera wasn't there. It was gone. Somebody stole the camera in the middle of the night. And that's the last I ever saw of that camera. And that one really got me. If it had been a commercial camera, which it was replaced with a commercial camera, I claimed it on my insurance and got a Ikigami, which I still have. I think I've serviced it once on the channel here a number of years ago when it wasn't working. But yeah, that one there, that's the one I wish I still had, just for the sentimental value of one that I had built by hand, and I wish I still had it. It wasn't a great camera. I mean, it worked, but it wasn't the best picture by any stretch. But it was just one that I had built, and I wish I still had it. But that's what happens, right? While I was in high school, I worked at Imperial TV. Imperial Electric got sold in around I'm going to say it was sold probably in the mid-70s as well. About the same time that my neighbor decided to pack it in. The Imperial Electric was owned by a fella named Sam Goliath, and his son Steve worked for him. And his son Steve started a mobile TV repair company, working out of a truck. And his dad sold the business to a fellow named James Ing. Jimmy worked for Sam, and he was very good. He understood solid state and tube equipment, and he was a very good tech, but he didn't understand anything modern. He didn't do VCRs, for example. When I was in high school, I went and worked for him. I'd work every day after school. I went in and worked a couple of hours, and I basically just helped him carry stuff around the shop, and he would teach me on television, because I had learned a bit about radio, but when I built this TV camera, well, I think this was actually before. It was when I was in junior high. I built the TV camera in senior high. But anyway, he gave me a job to work for him, to help him move stuff around and to teach me stuff. And I always wanted a color TV for my own. I had a little black and white set, but I wanted a color set. So I was talking to him about getting a little used color set, and he had this little AGS TV in the back, and he said to me, well, he says, I'll tell you what, he says, if you fix this TV, I'll sell it to you, and you can pay for it by working it off. So I had to work for like a month every day, 5 days a week. I had to work for like a month because I was paid like $2.50 an hour, and I think the TV cost $100. But I had to work this out, and he made me fix this set myself. He basically sat me down, and this TV had a bunch of problems. It had resistors. It was an all tube set. I wish I had that too. It got thrown out years ago, but I wish I still had that one, just because it's an all tube color set would be a real collector's item to have today. But we didn't think about that at the time. We thought tubes, they're junk. Nobody wants tubes. We want rid of tubes. Everything was solid state, right? So, anyway, I learned to fix that one. I had to fix that. He made me fix it, and that's basically how I was forced to learn how to troubleshoot. I was thrown in, and here's a schematic. Learn to read it. Follow the electrons, and if you need help, I'll give you a hand, but I'm not going to hold your hand to fix it. You're going to, his philosophy was, you'll never learn anything if I fix it for you. If I show you what part to change, you'll never learn anything. So if you want to learn, you've got to do it yourself. And if you get stuck, you can come to me, and I'll if you're totally lost, I'll point you in the direction. But you have to look at the symptom. So I get a TV that the vertical height is short. He would say, well, what circuit is that in? What is it? Is that the horizontal circuit? Is that the vertical circuit? And he would make me learn by experience, just isolation. And that is the way that I learned the basics in TV repair. I did that for 4 years when I worked there. When I was all through high school, I worked at this shop. And then I got out of high school, and I didn't want to do this type of work. The last thing I wanted to do was be fixing TVs. That was it. And I went to BCIT, and I took television production to learn how to do TV. That was my chosen career path, was producing television production or television programs. News gathering was actually what I was studying, was broadcast journalism. That's where I went to school for. But that didn't work out. It's a tough business to get into, and I shot myself in the foot when I was doing my internship at a local, just making sure these screws are tight, local community station. Did it for a couple of years while I was in BCIT as a volunteer. Was put on staff to do master control, and let's just say I got into a situation one night where all my programs were on 3/4 inch tape except for one. I had one program that was on 1 inch tape, and the one night in question, Only had one machine to go to air with. I had to queue all my tapes up manually. And, well, what happened was the one machine that I was on the air with broke down. It ate a tape on the air. And my supervisor calls me up, and it's like, why are we not on the air? Why are we off the air? You know, it was like, I said, well, you know, it's the machine ate a tape on the air. What do you want me to do? And the supervisor's response was, well, you think you can get the tape out of there and try cleaning the machine and see if it'll work? Which I did. You know, because, hey, my direct supervisor told me to do it. And, yeah, trying to imitate his voice, and I ended up killing my vocal cords. Yeah, management didn't think that was cool when I lifted the top off of a machine that had no top on it, because part of my job of running the station was I had to clean the heads every show. Like every day we had to clean the heads. So it wasn't like I hadn't been trained in how to clean the heads and how to clean the tape transport. I did, because I had to do it every day. So none of these machines had tops. So literally, the tops were just sitting on top of them. So literally, I lifted the top off the machine. I unwound a tape that was wound around the capstan shaft, and I cleaned it. And then I went back on the air. And for doing that, I got fired. And I found myself on a blacklist. Because when I tried to use them as a reference to get a job, the company that I worked for gave me a bad reference. If only I'd known what employment lawyers were about back then, I probably would have sued them. But being, I think I was like 20 at the time, 19 or 20, right out of school, 20. Yeah, being young, didn't know anything about that they could, you know, I could sue them for defamation for telling the, you know, prospective employer that I annoyed the engineer because I stepped on the engineer's toes and removed a tape. But that's what it was like. I mean, it's anybody that's worked in broadcast knows what it's like. You're hired to be fired. So that kind of put a wrench in my idea of working in broadcast, and I just started looking for work. And Sony was hiring, and I saw an ad for Sony, and I figured I would apply it at Sony because I had a little bit of experience. I was a junior servicer, and Sony took a chance and hired me and put me through their Betamax training course. And I worked on a lot of Beta machines when I worked for Sony. And it was a temporary position at Sony. It wasn't a permanent one. It was a temp position because we had to fix a bunch of machines that needed to have some mods done before they could be sold. And when my tenure was up, Sony said, well, we can't offer you a job here because there's no permanent hiring freeze on. This was 1984 at the time. And they said, we got a hiring freeze, so we can't hire you permanently here. There's a position that's open in Winnipeg if you want to relocate. And I said, thanks, but no thanks. I'm not moving to Winnipeg. It's not going to happen. And they said, okay, well, why don't you go and see Bill over at this shop out in my neck of the woods, the competition basically, at this shop called Jack's TV. He'd been around since '65. It was his dad that started the company. The son took over. They said, why don't you go and see Bill, and we'll give you a good reference. So I went and talked to him. First thing he does is he handed me a Beckman meter that was broken, and he said, can you fix this thing? So I fixed this Beckman digital meter. It was the same type of problem that happened with this one. The rubber interconnect between the circuit board and the display and the IC and stuff. It's exactly very similar, but the Beckman had a clip that held the display together. I think I've got a Beckman around here that the clip is broken. I should try to fix it someday. But anyway, I fixed that, and then he hands me a Beta machine that he had been working on for forever, and he was stumped. He was completely stuck. And he said to me, he says, can you think you can get this Beta machine going? And I said, sure, why not? So it was a dihedral adjustment, and the eccentricity adjustments were out. I guess I put this together the wrong way. I should have put this in first. So anyway, I got the eccentricity gauge out and did the eccentricity on the head drum, and I did the dihedral on the head drum. And this was like, he was like testing me, right? Because this is a machine that he had had. It had been in the shop for like a year. He couldn't fix it. He tried changing the heads, and he could not get the alignment. And I said to him, I said, is there a time limit on this thing? You know, just take your time. And I called him up about 10 minutes later. He said, oh, Bill, come over here and take a look. And here it is. It's playing a tape perfect. And then he handed me, the third thing he handed me was, he handed me an amplifier, a Sony receiver. And he said, this receiver doesn't work. Can you fix this receiver? And I listened to it, and it's all distortion. Like, it's all distorted. And I plugged a set of headphones in, turned off the speakers, and it's crystal clear. So I knew right away, because I've seen this before. It's outputs. One of the outputs is bad. So I opened it up, and of course the outputs tested okay on the meter. Do the diode test, and the junctions appear to be okay, but the output's bad. So open it up, change out the outputs, and I think one of the emitter follow resistors, like a 0.22 ohm, was open. Change that out, and perfect sound. So then his next response was, he says, well, yeah, you want to start on Monday. This was like a Friday I was there. Had me fixing this stuff around the shop that he had kicking around for forever. And I said, sure, I'll see you on Monday. So Monday rolls along, and I show up there, and see, the rest was history. It was a place that I worked at for 20 years. And I brought they were a Sony self-servicing dealer at the time. There was a couple of guys in there, and when I replaced one guy that was not too good, and as I say, I ended up being the guy there for 20 years. I left the business in 2003, as I could see the way that consumer electronics were going. Oh, what's that? I think there's been something spilt on this camera at some point. I could see the way that the consumer electronics were going, and I decided it was time to get out. So if you notice this connector here, or the position of it, it's right under this cover. And the problem with that is, if any water or anything gets in down here, guess what it's going to get on? That's why they have this little dam over here to try and shield this from anything spilling on it. Although the double-sided tape that was on there is dried up. I should stick another piece on there just so I can stick it on top there. But that may be also part of the problem, as moisture got in there. But usually it's the switch. The switch goes bad, and this connector goes bad. That's what causes these ones to behave like this one was behaving. We'll put some double-sided tape and see if I can stick this piece back on so that it'll stay in place. Okay, double-sided tape on here. I can peel it. Okay, that should hold this in place like that. That's just to keep any anything that were to drip through the top cover here from getting onto the this little circuit board, little flexible board. So I get some of the screws back into it, and then I will clean that switch on the side the same way with the deoxit. I'm just going to squirt some deoxit into that switch from the side of it if it can get at it, just to keep it from getting oxidated. And that probably will fix this camera. And then we'll see what records and plays, which I'm sure it will. In case you're wondering, was my decision to go into the TV repair business what I considered a good decision? Probably not. Although I did okay. You know, it was there was good money in it. Ask anybody who was in the business in the 80s and 90s. There was a lot of money to be made fixing VCRs. And that was my specialty. Incidentally, was VCRs and stereo equipment. But I did TVs as well. But I did a lot of VCRs, like tons and tons of VCRs. Probably more VCRs than anything else. Camcorders, of course, as well, but the primary money maker was VCRs. It was a tough business to be in. More so from the point of view of others, namely banks. You know, trying to buy a house, trying to get a mortgage. What do? I'm a repair tech. Work in a TV shop. Oh, thanks. Declined. It was one of those type of jobs where the attitude from the business, at least financial side of things, is they all had the same opinion. Well, this is a job that you're not going to have a job. This is we're going to go to a throwaway. Like they knew something. Like they knew what was going on. This is something that's not going to be viable down the road, and they were right. I mean, it took a while. I mean, they were wrong for the first 20 years, but in the end, that's just the way it became. Right? It was a non-sustainable business when everything became throwaway like it is now. Just looking for where that last screw goes. I'll find it. I don't see any place I've missed a screw, but there's one stupid screw left over, and I gotta find where it goes. It was underneath this cover. Actually, it was right that held the lens cap on, or the lens with the front on. I think it was just under this cover. If I'm not mistaken. It goes right there. Yeah, that's where it is. Right there. And then that cover goes back on like that. Alright, let's power this thing up and see what it does. That works, and I'm just going to get some deoxit into this switch down here if I can't get in here, and I should be able to get in here somehow. Easier said than done. That'll get the contacts. This is like a little leaf switch, right? That just has a little lever on it. So that should, hopefully that will do it. We'll see if it works when I close it. There we go. Okay, I'll put the side cover on it, and then we're going to test this machine and make sure it works. Okay, it's on. There you go, camera's back together. Let's test it. To play these ones back on a regular TV required a special cable by Sony, and Sony's cable was wired differently than everybody else's. So a regular one like this one over here that I've got, for example, this one's wired ground is the furthest one back, and then it's red is the second ring, white is the first ring, and yellow is the tip. And the Sony the ground is the second ring, with the red being the shield, yellow being the first ring, and white being the tip. That's the way Sony wired theirs. So a lot of times people would lose their Sony connection cable, their dongle cable, dongle meaning a custom cable, and they'd go and buy a generic one like this, and they'd wonder why it doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work because Sony wired theirs different than everybody else. Plugs into the connector there, and that'll let me play this on the TV. Here's something you notice about this camera. When I flip it into night shot, it doesn't turn it green. It just blows everything out because, of course, it opens the iris up. But you can see it also changes the way the focus works. Playback position, and I'll load a tape and see if it plays my tape. And it should play my pre-recorded tape, which it does, with sound. We'll do a test recording. Switch it to record mode. Don't want to get feedback. Okay, we'll just do some recording on the bench here. And play it back. Okay.
TRV30.
Oh, that's the camera I sold. I was testing it yesterday. I was selling this camera.
What the fuck is this one? This one's a TRV30. TRV30.
This is the recording I just made. And that's what I just made on this one. So this one's fixed.
And play it back.
So this one's all done. And we'll catch you in the next one real soon. Bye for now.